On behalf of the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, I'd like to welcome you to the PBSCCS Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Messina.
All right, everybody. Tonight's episode of the podcast is going to be another group episode. I'll have the guys introduce themselves, and then we'll get going. So we'll go Joe first, Logan second, name, org, position within the org, and then anything relevant. And then after that, we'll dive into the topic.
Hi, my name is Joe Leo. I'm strength coach on the minor league side with the Arizona Diamondbacks going into year 3.
Logan Jones, strength and conditioning with the Chicago White Sox, also in player development. Spent the previous 5 seasons prior to joining the White Sox with the Arizona Diamondbacks. So I am now familiar with Joe and all of the things that are going on that side of the glass as well. But Chris, thanks again for having us on, man. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys taking time. As we are recording, this is right in the middle of spring training, and that is going to be the topic of discussion tonight. So hopefully we don't go too long because I know sleep is very valuable and free time is very minimal in spring training. So it's been like 200 episodes, and I realized I don't think I've ever actually had a conversation about spring training. So I'm hoping that we can kind of give the listeners an inside look behind the curtain, so to speak, of what makes spring training, how it's different from the season. And then hopefully, whatever else we get into. But let's start off just daily responsibilities throughout spring training and then kind of what a day looks like for you. And then we'll just kind of take it from there if you guys are cool with that. And Joe, if you want to kick us off, let's get going.
Sounds good. So we start off the first part of spring training with early camp, which is kind of half, maybe a little more of our minor league players. A little bit lighter of a schedule then. And then around the beginning of March, we got our full camp. So close to 180 guys. Schedule's similar throughout. Usually get in the building around 5:30, get my own lift in. Time to do that, keep the body strong, get some conditioning in. Then after that, we have a meeting with our medical staff around 7:30. And then following that, players start to roll in around 8:30. We'll have hands-on with every player in some way, shape, or form during the day. So position players first. We'll take them through a warm-up and then whatever they may have in the weight room. After that, we'll have 30-minute to an hour buffer before the pitchers come in. Same thing for them. Take them through a warm-up. They'll go throw PFP, whatever they're doing for the day. When they come back, we'll take them through some sort of weight room activity, whether that's a lift, a CNS prep, or a recovery circuit. And then we start wrapping up for the day, depending if there's some sort of sim game or an actual game or whatever might be going on. We'll meet with our trainers and loop them in on anything we might be seeing throughout the day and vice versa. And then leaving the facility sometime around 4:30 every day, depending on what's going on.
Yeah, that's a good way to kick us off there, Joe. I think obviously I have the luxury now of being able to play the comparison game a bit and, taking things into consideration and observing and being part of the development of a couple of different processes now with a couple of different orgs and, albeit like the daily schedule, right? And a lot of the things that go on within the walls of the facilities are probably very similar across the board. The personnel does tend to be different. Some of the philosophies and some of the ideas about how we action some of the things I think tend to be a little bit different, organization to organization, but in large part, I'll echo the same thing, right? Like it's an early morning, it's a late afternoon. There's hopefully some type of self-care on the front end of that. I think it looks different for everyone. Something to, yes, wake them up, but also to kind of lock them in for the day. Whether that's some kind of like a morning routine, if that's a lift, if that's a cold plunge, some variety of breath work or whatever it is. I think that, like I said, you kind of like meander around within the walls of the clubhouse early morning hours, and you'll see people doing a variety of things to kind of get themselves ready. And when players start to show up, right, like there are meetings going on simultaneously, medical meeting, strength meeting, a full-blown staff meeting to kind of get everyone on the same page. for what a certain day may entail. And the way that we've done things over the past, this is year 3 now with the White Sox here is, we'll have a couple of camps early to mid January to try to help maybe onboard groups of players into that spring training timeframe that will then funnel into, Joe, what you were talking on, the early camp, mini camp. That will be in some cases an overlap. In some cases, we'll bring a different group of players in that may be utilized in some form or fashion, early stages of major league camp to back up games and serve as like reserves off the bench there. And then we'll funnel into more of a full camp where major league side, minor league sides are running simultaneous, and it is true chaos. But I've learned to embrace that. I think early in my career, as many people will probably echo this, of it tend to get maybe sped up at times and try to like figure out where I need to be, how I need to be, how do I need to show up to do my job. And I think over time I've realized that I don't necessarily have to try to get out of myself, if you will, to be able to do those types of things. It has definitely slowed down for me, and which is understandable, I think, as well. But in large part, I think that I've grown to really appreciate this time. And maybe we can dig into it a little bit more, but although it does come with some negativity and just some chaos, I think there are a lot of like hidden gems that can be taken from this period of time that is quite literally meant to ramp us up for the full championship season and get people ready to go physically and mentally and all the things that like maybe fit under that umbrella.
Yeah, I'd like to get into the good, the bad, the ugly later. You guys both kind of really hammered down the fact that it's a very long day. You're in very early. Most of the time the games are going to be at 1 o'clock. So Joe, like you said, you're probably out of there 4:30. For me, when I was in spring training, I would like go grab dinner with either my wife or a friend, and then I'd be in bed by like 8 o'clock. Just one, because I was exhausted, and two, because you had to be up at 4 a.m. the next day, and sleep is very important, like I said earlier. So one of the things that maybe we can kind of hit on is if you're a listener who's not familiar with baseball, there are a number of fields and a number of assignments because all of the players in the organization are in spring training. It's not just Major League spring training. You have Major League and minor league. You also have guys going from minor league camp to Major League camp back and forth. Some teams have a separate Major League facility versus minor league facility. Some have everything in the same place. So just kind of dive into like how you navigate, not just the schedule, but like the intricacies of the schedule. Like I'm on field 2 or I'm on field 6 or I'm on the main field. Then I got to go to conditioning field. Like, how does that look for you guys? Do you have like assignments of staff ahead of time on what fields they're at and you stay there? Or is it based on like time blocks or teams? Like, how is that operating so that everybody can manage the chaos that you're talking about, Logan?
Hit it, Joe.
Yeah, so I think the word you alluded to, Logan, that chaos is definitely what it can feel like at times. Being able to find a way to get that to slow down a little bit and figure out what's going on starts with the schedule, in my opinion. So it kind of looks like a Denny's menu this time of year. A lot of different colors, a lot of people going different places. I think the important thing to do on our end is we have a meeting every day just as strength coaches talking about what we're going to do throughout the day. And then I circle or highlight on my schedule, okay, I need to be on this field at this time for this warm up, or a coach wanted to go through with us on this field, whenever it might be, to make sure we're out there on time and we don't miss on that. And I think for the players too, like we're the first people these guys see most days. So being able to funnel them out where they need to be, I know helps our coaching staff and helps our players be in the right spot at the right time. The weight room is our primary responsibility, obviously. So spend most of our day in there. But when we have running, warm-ups and bases or whatever that might be, we'll go out there after the weight room, make sure we have some coverage in there. A lot of flying bullets, a lot of people in different places, but usually have enough for a couple guys to go out and hopefully observe a little bit of practice. Just helps us fill in some blanks and see where guys are at and it's one of the good parts of this time of year. We do have people to bounce around and can be out for a little bit at certain times. So that's what I'd say as far as the schedule goes.
Yeah, no, I think that's great information to build on in a little bit. I think this maybe goes without being said, but I do feel like that. I mean, communication across the board is probably the most important trait to bring to the table. I think being proactive in terms of and structured, right? Like Chris, you touched on maybe having some assignments or communicating as to like what certain responsibilities and roles may be on a given day. Like, hey, so and so is going to represent the strength staff and this staff meeting, and then so and so, is going to go to that on-field skill coaches meeting to discuss how S&C is teaming up with this group of coaches to impact that player in that way. And then I think from there, as you start to actually be boots on the ground, like, yes, we have to make sure that all of the things that fall underneath our umbrella, which, oh, by the way, is growing exponentially year to year. Like it did used to be quite literally probably just weight room coverage and on-field stretch coverage, right? Like it probably used to be that. And now it's very much that. It's very much conditioning on simultaneous fields running concurrently. It's blending routines, it's nutrition meetings, it's sports science. There's a lot, right? So I think with that, that's pretty cool that it's grown and will continue to grow in that way. But I think that also highlights the importance of like being proactive and making sure that not only are we where we're supposed to be probably ahead of time, but that we go in with like a pretty thorough plan, and then a willingness to adapt on that plan depending on like what the day brings, right? If the stretch needs to be shortened from 10 minutes to 8 minutes, like how are we going to be able to make that adjustment without screwing up the rest of the schedule for the players on that given field. So as far as the schedule goes, I do feel like it's important that like not only the people within the walls of the weight room are on the same page, but I think it extends a bit beyond as well to the medical staff and likely also to the on-field staff as well.
Yeah, for sure. You guys have both mentioned meetings like multiple times already. And I think spring training is kind of like the place of meetings, right? It seems like you're having meetings about meetings to prepare for other meetings. But with that, there is probably something that's really relevant, and kind of just to build on your point there, Logan, is a lot of times the players are on a schedule that starts with us, right? Joe, you mentioned like we're usually the first ones that they see. They kind of get organized. Like if BP is supposed to start at 9 o'clock and our stretch is supposed to start at 8:45, but they're not there till 8:50, like BP still needs to start at 9 o'clock. And so it's kind of on us to like make sure that first step of the day goes appropriately and they kind of funnel through the rest of their activities. And it's just something that we have to work around. But within the other context of that, with the meetings and all of that, like talk about collaborating amongst other groups, whether that be medical, whether that be pitching staff, hitting staff, managers, even kitchen staff, even nutrition staff, sports psych, right? Like there's so many people there. And again, if you've never been in baseball and you're listening, everybody in the org is basically at spring training at the same time. So you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in the same place, all with the same goal, but all doing like slightly different things. And it's just trying to like keep everybody organized within like the bumpers of a bowling lane, right? Like we're trying to not have gutter balls. So with that comes a lot of communicating and collaborating. So if we can, like, let's just kind of hit on, again, formally you're having meetings, but what else during the day are you doing to kind of keep guys in line towards their ultimate goals of both that day and then of spring training as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it pays to be a generalist, right? Like I think to be honest, I really do feel like that people that have like an increased level of awareness, right? They understand like how they're fitting into the grander scheme of things. They're not consumed with what only is going on between their ears and in front of their eyes, are the people that succeed the most in this environment. And also, most importantly, the people that can impact our players to the highest degree, because those are the people that can take something in visually or audibly and then flip it and make some sense of it. And maybe in real time, literally share that information with another coach on staff or literally, oh, that maybe this is an injury concern or a watch item, I'm going to parade over to the training room or to the other field or to the dugout where the athletic trainer is to share that information. And maybe it helps us get ahead of something that could happen, right? So I think it's like that maybe goes back to the proactivity of the importance of that, I guess you could say. But I do feel like that it pays to be a generalist in a sense of you got to have some awareness around what's going on, not only within your discipline, but outside of that. And those types of scenarios do tend to happen outside of like a structured 7 a.m. medical meeting, right? Like that, those are the things that happen in the trenches that you can't really, that you maybe do plan for, but you can't account for, if you will. It's more of just operating on the fly and not necessarily shooting from the hip, but having kind of like your process in place. Like, hey, if this happens, this is how I would handle it. If that happens, I should probably go this avenue, and incorporating and including the appropriate personnel to optimally put the player in a place that they need to be to maybe avoid an incidence of injury or increase levels of performance, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Those meetings themselves, it's more reporting on what is going on throughout the day. So I'm thinking with our training staff in particular, I have a lot of touch points throughout the day with the trainer that I'm going to be working with this year. And that way we can manage the guys that we're working with currently, and we can report back to the larger group about what's going on. But the actual action happens through more of that informal communication and the touch points that we have throughout the day. I think you made a great point too, Chris, about, everyone in the organization is in the building this time of year. So there's a lot of cool opportunities to talk shop with people that you might not be seeing all year. They're not on your staff or not in your department. And there can be some cool conversations and run-ins had that you want to have the opportunity to do throughout the year. So just try to make a point to say hi to everyone and get a chance to pick everyone's brain that you can, because there's a lot of different thoughts and lenses in that building that you might not be exposed to if you don't.
Yeah, maybe sometimes a little too many, but most of the time it's probably for the better, right? Are you guys spending time in big league camp as well, or are you just in minor league camp?
Split responsibility.
Are you guys traveling as well?
On the road, like within spring training, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Nice. So Logan, maybe this one would be more specifically to you, but you've seen obviously two different organizations now. How does that camp differ being in one versus the other? And then Joe, kind of for you, maybe once we get there, like what does major league camp look like versus minor league camp, or are they kind of one and the same in the organization for you guys?
Gotcha.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I can kind of kick us off here, and then maybe Joe can piggyback, because obviously I would think there'd be a degree of overlap here. Just now speaking in again in comparison, I mean, one, geographically, the two organizations are on opposite sides of the valley, right here in the Phoenix metropolitan area. One's in the East Valley, one's on the West Valley, and if we're talking travel specifically in spring training for major league clubs, we have it pretty good out here in Arizona in comparison to some of our counterparts in Florida in terms of just travel, right? Like everything's within maybe an hour, give or take, radius out here. So we have a definite advantage logistically when it comes to travel within spring training. If we're talking comparison minor league camp versus major league camp, I think that, again, this likely differs organization to organization. I'll say that the two organizations that I've been fortunate to be a part of, there are a lot of similarities though. We share the same building, right? Like there's not a separate major league facility and a separate minor league facility. We do have two separate weight rooms. It was the same with Arizona. It's the same with Chicago. So our training within the walls of the weight room happened concurrently, but in separate locations. However, it's a short walk down the hall in both instances to have any degree of crossover from camp to camp. So again, to kind of go back to the communication front, like there is quite frequent communication, although the players may differ from, like, say, major league staff to minor league staff, coordinating level PD employees to major league on-field coaches, We're talking, even in some cases, some seasonal assistants may have some interaction with members of like full-time major league staff, which I think is pretty unique and I think pretty cool as well. To build on what Joe touched on, of like, we have an opportunity in spring training to share time with people that we just simply won't have that opportunity again until the calendar circles back around to spring training 2026. So I think that leveraging that is critical, but just logistically speaking, like, things are relatively convenient, in large part due to just the layout of the spring training facilities that I've worked in my 8 years. And yeah, but I think in large part we have it pretty good out here in Arizona.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head as far as the travel goes. Nothing too much longer than a 45-minute to an hour road trip, even with the traffic, which is nice. And then as far as the major league, minor league side, like Logan said, same building, 2 separate weight rooms and training rooms, but obviously with players going down throughout the course of spring training, there's got to be a lot of overlap and communication. For us, we get a couple-day rotation down there after your first year working there. So you get an opportunity to have hands-on with some different players and get to be down with the major league staff for a couple days and see what their operations like. It's pretty similar to what we do, but it's just a little smaller group of players, and then some different methods to learn about too. So
I had Florida spring training, so I always heard good things about Arizona Springs. Obviously, I live in Arizona now. I understand the valley and the layout and the geography of everything. So I was on a lot of those long bus rides. Some of them 2.5 hours there, play the game 2.5 hours back. But for us, we had one weight room for both major league and minor league. And when I first got to Boston in 2016 was my first year there. We had 3 racks in the weight room. And if a major league guy came in, the minor league guys had to give up the racks to the major league guys, right? Like, respect the major league players. So I can remember a time where, like, one guy was squatting on one rack, one guy was doing RDLs on another rack, and then we had one rack for like 30 minor league guys, and they're just like shotgunning through this rack, like trying to get their squats in and everything. And then the next year we got a 4th rack, and then the year after that we had 6 racks, and it kind of became like 3 for the major league side, 3 for the minor league side. But if we need some overlap for the major league guys, like, basically we would have some respect there. And then COVID hit, so we had like an outdoor facility plus the original weight room, and then after that they kind of kept the outdoor one and it became the minor league one. It was kind of a whole thing. But I'm envious of you guys, 1, being in Phoenix over Florida, and 2, just having more weight room space. We just didn't have a ton, so we had a lot of overlap. And there were times, I would say 99% of the time, like, the minor league guys were very respectful of the major league guys, and the major league guys were very open to talking with the minor league guys and kind of interacting with them. There were a couple of times where it was like, hey, we need to get this work done. Like, can we have some space? But for the most part, like, that was probably a net positive thing for our minor league guys to see our major league guys training, to be following our program, to really have some like homegrown guys that went through the system and really bought into what we were trying to do, and have that next wave see them and like, oh, I could be that guy. And then have that major league guy be like, hey, you need to listen to these guys. They're really good. They're taking care of us, blah, blah, blah. So most of the time it was really good. But yeah, the travel in Florida is just really much more difficult than what I've heard in Arizona. The one thing in Florida is if you play a game that's further away, sometimes you just show up, hit in the cage, get on the bus and go. Where I've heard in Arizona, the schedule is almost the same every day. Like, you're basically going to practice every day in Arizona because you're not traveling that far. So for us, it was almost like a built-in, not like off day, because obviously you're traveling, but it's like, hey, if you're on the bus today, like, literally don't even come to the medical meeting, just show up, get on the bus, take care of the guys at the field, and then slide back when the game's over. So it was almost like a deload day, so to speak. But again, the trade-off was you're on the bus for 2 hours there, sit in the hot sun, sit in the humidity, and then 2 hours back. But I want to talk about when guys come to spring training. One, I want to get into like the intake process, and then from there, how you're taking the intake and kind of branching off with programs and player plans and all of that stuff. So whatever you guys are able to share and you're comfortable to share, what does it look like when guys show up, either for those early camps you guys mentioned or for the actual like report date of spring training? Like, what does that intake look like for you guys?
Yeah, I'd kick us off. Just as far as the strength staff, we take them through two things. They'll come in for their physicals and their medical clearance on a Sunday night, and we'll take them through a mobility screen, just get hip range, shoulder range, just general mobility screen that I'm sure every org does some variation of. And then after that, once they're cleared and ready to go, they'll come in Monday normally. And then the main thing we want to get from them throughout the week is some sort of force plate baseline screening. And then we usually take those two pieces of information, the mobility screen and the force plate numbers, and put that together when we're writing programs for these guys. Some guys might show up like we expected, look the same as when they left. Some guys bigger, some guys stronger, some guys bigger, not in a good way, or too small, or whatever it might be. So just being able to be adaptable and take that information in as we go, and being flexible with your training program. Try to do something individual for each guy, and just depends what that information looks like, and collaborating with the coaches as we go too. They're trying to do new stuff with them or something different in the cages or out on the mound, whatever it might be. So putting all that information together and trying to get them the best program and ready for the season is where we come from.
Yeah, I would echo much of that. I mean, I think again, I've been the beneficiary of being a part of a couple of different ways of going about this, right? I do think that the medical portion of the intake, the physical process is, I mean, very, very similar across the board, right? And it's just a way of checking in on an annual basis to make sure that physically, medically, they're cleared and ready to go. One decent difference from what Joe talked on there, and the way that we, again, like we did that process right there that Joe just touched on during my time with the D-backs, and that it does differ just a touch from the way that we do it here. Is a lot of the range of motion passive type assessments are done by our medical staff as opposed to strength staff, and to each their own, right? Like neither one of them is better per se. I think it's just a different distribution in terms of the workload, and maybe just trying to standardize that as much as we can. As long as I feel like as long as the same group of people, or maybe in some cases the same person themselves, is screening like a certain joint, the reliability of that data is probably going to be improved, just because all of us are a little bit different, maybe how we would assess or how we see things as well. But moving past that, past some of the passive range of motion assessments, like we do have a relatively short movement screening assessment that we do run them through, that, if I'm being completely honest, like it yields similar results across the board. Sometimes we action the data, sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's for contact, sometimes it's it goes into a database and we refer to it sometime middle of the season if something happens. So I'd say that like our ability to action that is probably not as strong as our ability to action some of maybe the more objective data that we are getting, and we're able to bucket guys off of on the force plates, on some other techie stuff that we put them on to try to get like objective data points, more or less to just get a general idea of, obviously we know where they were upon intake on previous seasons. We know where they were upon intake if it's a draft class. We know upon exit where they were at the end of the season or periodically throughout off-season camps. So now we're able to just have a better idea, objectively speaking, of maybe where they are at currently, and some trendy type things, positive and or negative, that we're able to kind of like help guide some of our decision making. So I would say that that's probably the biggest difference from my first 5 seasons to now my next 3, is just I've been super fortunate to just see like really good people doing really good things and things that they're really smart in. And I've been able to kind of pick up and put my own spin on those things and be able to like frame it in my own head about how am I going to action these things, and been surrounded by really good people that have allowed me the freedom to do that. So the intake process is quite extensive, and I think like the people that do it the best in my experience are the people that can take the information, make it make sense relative to like what they're actually going to be doing. And then that's kind of like how effective our staff is just how well can we action these pieces of data to impact on-field performance and health outcomes.
You guys mentioned range of motion and tech. How about conditioning tests? Are you guys doing any conditioning tests when guys enter?
We don't do any sort of conditioning test per se. I think the main thing we're worried about conditioning wise is for position players, by the time they get in game, that they have some sort of running buildup. I think we kind of assume, just to be safe, that maybe they weren't doing as much running as we'd usually do in the off season, and they probably put a little more priority on the lifting piece of things. So just giving them a nice steady build up, especially the guys that get here a little earlier, and building in the bases so they're ready when the in-game part of it comes. And then for the pitchers, pretty similar. Just start them off pretty slow and build them up so they're getting a little bit of everything, getting some aerobic capacity, getting some work capacity, getting some sprint work. So we're touching a little bit of everything, because most likely they did not touch one of those three things in the off season. If they did, great. If they didn't, we're still going to build them up and put it in the program.
I've seen it done both ways. I'm not partial to one versus the other, if I'm being completely honest. I do feel like it probably depends on the personnel in place and some of the decisions that go into that. I will say that in my experience, I think some of the conditioning as it relates to testing specifically action better in smaller groups. So maybe that does fit better in a back end off season camp. Maybe it fits better with a smaller group of players in major league camp versus a mass group in minor league camp. But in terms of like prescribing things off of the results of a conditioning test, we do things in a very similar fashion, right? Like we're generally going to cater to the least common denominator and adjust accordingly to make sure that like our assumption is going to be ideally like that they're doing what we're prescribing. However, it becomes very evident very early that not everyone does what obviously we're prescribing and what we're asking. So we do need to have the ability to make some adjustments again in real time to make sure that we're not running guys in the ground, and that we are able to give the guys that have greater capacities chronically better like interventions and be more aggressive as it's appropriate. So I've seen it done both ways, and I've been part of systems that have done it both ways, and I'm not partial one way versus the other, if I'm being honest with you.
Joe, to your point, if they were with me in the offseason, they definitely hit sprints and conditioning and all of the good stuff.
Oh, we know that for
sure. Having been in the game and just knowing how much they run, it's a priority of mine in the offseason to make sure that they run. And I think you kind of hit it right on the head there. Is the most of the time the first thing to go is the running, right? Like guys are never going to short out on swings in the off season. They're never going to short out on throwing in the off season or lifting in the off season. It's usually going to be the running that gets cut out, and they run a lot when they play. Surprisingly, they do run a lot despite what people think. And so they need to be ready. They need to have their legs ready. That's just my own belief. Logan, to your point, it was always a point of debate when I was in on whether you should do a conditioning test or not. A lot of the pushback against it was actually from front office types, basically saying that there is no specific test to measure conditioning for baseball over the course of 162. Totally there with them. I actually don't disagree. We had it as kind of a standard in the sense that if you did even some running, you should come in good enough shape to pass our test. And the guys that did not pass the test probably didn't put in enough running work, which gives us an inside look to the point that you guys are talking about. It's like, we probably need to slow cook this guy's time on his feet, his running, his sprinting, but find other ways to get him into game shape without completely burying him. So there was reason behind it. Whether you agree with the test specifically or not is probably another thing. But it was just kind of a standard of like, if we don't have anything to hold them accountable to running, they're definitely not going to run, or they're more than likely not going to run. If we have some sort of test in place, at least if they run, like at least if they know the test is there and they're going to have to run it in the first week, like they'll probably run before they get there, or they're going to look completely foolish in front of people. So it's something we went back and forth on, and it changed to a few different tests and a few different iterations of the same test while I was there. And like I said, I think the underlying principle was just, we want to make sure you've at least done some sort of running before you get here. But again, we also had the built up progressions of, your buildups, and then you run your mini arcs or your mini pulls around the dirt, and then you get them on the bases, and then you get them more aggressive on the bases, and then most of the time they're ready. And then the other thing is, like, they usually have a game progression built in. Nobody's really just playing 9 innings right off the bat, right? Like, it's kind of part of spring training. But something that you guys both mentioned is just meeting players where they're at based on the testing. And so just, kind of to paint a picture here, right? It's like, if the 3 of us showed up to spring training, one of us is probably going to be over prepared and ready to play 5 to 7 innings right away. One of us, it should not be in a game for 2 weeks because we're super underprepared. And then one of us is going to kind of be in the middle there. And I think that's usually kind of the distribution. It's not always like equally distributed in those 3 groups, but those are usually the groups you see. So how are you guys meeting the players where they're at and kind of getting them prepared? Are you just everybody's starting at the low end? Or are you meeting all the guys? Are you doing different programs? Because again, the other thing is you got 200 players running around, right? Like, it's a lot to manage. So how are you guys handling all of that after that intake process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd like to clarify something that I said earlier too, just to make this clear. I do feel like that we should test to the best of our ability things that we deem to be important. I do believe that. However, like, the practicality sometimes of doing something in a mass in a mass exodus type of way in a minor league setting is not always feasible. So I do feel like we need to cater what it is that we're doing to be actionable, if you will, with just our environment, right? Like, we're not able to change what necessarily is being asked of these players on a daily basis from a holistic standpoint. But I am of the belief that we should test what we feel to be important and impactful to their growth and development as a player. So that's why that was kind of like along the vein of the comment of maybe this is more practical in a smaller group of players. And I'm thinking more on like the major league camp side, where, maybe a half to a third of the players that maybe even just start in minor league camp. And we still haven't, so right this second, we still haven't had all of our players report to this camp on the minor league side. So that's growing. But to your point, Chris, or to your question on meeting guys where they are and how are we able to prescribe varying degrees of intensities and volumes, yes to all of that. We do our best to do those things within the walls of the weight room. So from a programmatic standpoint, from a traditional strength training standpoint, we do our best to, again, kind of bucket guys based on the information that we're getting from an objective standpoint. Of course, we'd like to educate ourselves as well on things that they did over the course of the off season that they found to be beneficial or impactful to their development. We're able to visibly see in most cases, like, is this guy where we would expect him to be or where we would want him to be given the time of year? And then it's also looping in pitching coaches, hitting coaches, defensive coaches as well, to maybe get an idea of how does this guy look kind of in his element, right? Like, out on the field, does he look like he is moving well laterally, crossing over defensive drills? How does he look in the box? How does he look in the tunnel? How does he look in his bullpen, his side sessions? I think that can also be an important piece of information to take into consideration of, how well are we connecting the weight room to the performance environment that they likely care about the most. And I think that, like, all of these things are taken into consideration. But to be direct, like, yes, like, we are prescribing varying degrees of intensities and volumes, frequencies, et cetera, not only within the walls of the weight room, but then also maybe in some cases more specifically to some of the running volumes and intensities on the field for some of our hitters as they've come in at different places, and then also as their workloads are varying quite drastically now, even a few weeks deep into early camp at the beginning of minor league, and we're about halfway through major league camp as well, just a touch under halfway through major league camp. So as people's end game volumes are varying and practice volumes, workout volumes are varying, it's important to, again, daily check-ins to ensure that like they're where they need to be, and pushing recovery if that needs to be pushed, pushing work if that needs to be repushed, and trying to keep them, in a zone of acceptability, if you will, and keep them out of running hot.
Yeah, and to your point, Logan, like that's a lot of information that we're taking in. It can be a lot of new information depending on how guys come back and what they worked on over the off season. So blending as much of that together as possible, I think, puts guys in the best spot for the upcoming year. I think on our end, just leveraging the relationships we have and creating new relationships with the guys we haven't had is really powerful and a great way to get to the meat of what we're trying to do faster. So guys I've had before, just getting with them, seeing what they were doing in the off season, how they're feeling day to day too. How you're feeling, how to go out there, what's practice looking like, so on and so forth. And then with the new guys, just educating them on, how we do things and what our day to day looks like, and then asking them too, hey, where have you been before, or what has your previous spring trainings looked like, and trying to figure out where they're coming from too, and try to blend those two together and get a program everyone's happy with. I think there's a lot of power too, and there's a lot going on in a lot of meetings throughout the day, but being able to sit down with a guy for 5 or some minutes and, hey, we took in these mobility screens and this is what we're seeing on the force plates, and this is what I'm hearing from the hitting coach or the pitching coach or the infield, whoever it might be. And this is the information we've got. These are a couple things I think we should work on in the weight room and how we could blend it to the field. What do you have too? I think the more guys play and the higher level they're at and the older they are, they'll have a little more information for you. But that way they can take ownership over their program. That's, I think, how you get the best buy-in to get those goals accomplished quicker.
All right, everybody, that's going to conclude part one of this two-part interview with Joe and Logan. I hope you enjoyed this one. This is years and years and years too late, but better late than never. And I think this is a really good starting point into a dive into what spring training looks like for strength and conditioning coaches in professional baseball. 3 things that I took from the guys in this episode. Being a generalist will help you to build positive relationships with other staff members and departments. Making data that is collected during initial intake assessments more digestible and actionable will help you with long-term player buy-in. And testing protocols should be determined based on what is deemed important and feasible within your given training population. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you again on the next one.